Ladies, welcome back to the channel. If you're a woman over 40 who's navigating the dating world, or if you're in a relationship that sometimes leaves you questioning your own judgment, then what I'm about to share with you today could be the most important information you'll hear all year. This video is going to open your eyes to the sophisticated psychological tactics that toxic men specifically use to target and control mature women like you. Before we dive deep into this critical topic, I need you to do something for me right now. If you find value in this content, if this information resonates with you, or if you know another woman who needs to hear this message, please hit that like button. Your likes help this video reach more women who desperately need this information. And don't just watch and leave. I want to hear from you in the comments. Share your experiences, your thoughts, your questions. Your voice matters, and your story could be the one that helps another woman recognize what's happening in her own life. Also, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, click that subscribe button right now. We're building a community of empowered, aware women who refuse to be manipulated or controlled. And here's something else that really helps. If you want to support the work we're doing here, creating this free content that helps women protect themselves, consider supporting the channel with super thanks. It's a direct way to show your appreciation and helps us continue producing these in-depth, research-based videos that corporate sponsors won't touch because we tell the truth that makes some people uncomfortable. Now, share this video. Send it to your friends, your sisters, your daughters, your mother. Post it on your social media. This information is too important to keep to yourself. The more women who understand these tactics, the fewer victims these toxic men can claim. Here's something that might shock you. You're not being targeted randomly. Older women, particularly women over 40, are specifically chosen by certain toxic men because of characteristics that these predators see as vulnerabilities. Your life experience, your emotional maturity, your financial stability, your desire for meaningful connection, these aren't weaknesses. But toxic men have learned to weaponize them against you. What we're going to explore today isn't just about recognizing a bad boyfriend or avoiding a difficult relationship. We're talking about systematic psychological manipulation tactics that can erode your sense of self, drain your resources, damage your health, and leave you questioning your own sanity. These aren't the obvious red flags you've been warned about. These are the subtle, sophisticated tactics that fly under the radar precisely because they're designed to exploit the wisdom and emotional intelligence you've developed over your lifetime. I'm going to walk you through the specific psychological tactics these men use, why they target older women specifically, how to recognize when you're being manipulated, and most importantly, how to protect yourself and break free if you're already caught in one of these toxic dynamics. This isn't going to be comfortable. Some of you might recognize your own relationship in what I'm describing. That's okay. Awareness is the first step to freedom. So settle in. This is going to be comprehensive because your safety and well-being deserve nothing less than the complete truth. Let's begin. The specific vulnerability of mature women. Let me start by addressing something crucial. If you're a woman over 40, you might think that your life experience makes you immune to manipulation. You've lived through relationships, you've learned from mistakes, you've developed better judgment. You're more confident, more financially secure, more emotionally mature than you were in your 20s or 30s. Surely, you think, you can spot a toxic man from a mile away. But here's the toxic, uncomfortable truth. The very qualities that make you a mature, accomplished woman are exactly what certain toxic men are looking for. They're not interested in the young, naive woman with no resources and no life experience. They want you, and they want you precisely because of everything you've built and become. Let me explain why. When a toxic man targets a younger woman, she often has a strong support network of friends and family who are actively involved in her life. Her parents are likely still guiding her decisions. Her peer group is large and interconnected. She has less to lose materially because she's still building her life. She's also more likely to publicly seek help or vent about relationship problems on social media or to friends. But you, as a mature woman, you're in a different position. Many of your friends have moved away or gotten absorbed in their own family lives. Your children, if you have them, are likely grown and focused on their own lives. Your parents may have passed away or be elderly themselves. You've learned to be independent and self-reliant. You're less likely to burden others with your problems. You handle things yourself. You're private about your personal life because you've learned that not everyone needs to know your business. Do you see what I'm getting at? You're more isolated than you realize. Not socially isolated necessarily, but relationally isolated in a way that makes you vulnerable. And toxic men recognize this. They can sense it. They know that you're less likely to have people questioning your choices or interfering in your relationship. They know you're less likely to run to your friends or family with every concern. Your independence, your self-sufficiency, these become entry points for manipulation. Then there's the financial aspect. By the time you reach your 40s, 50s, or 60s, you've likely accumulated some assets. You own a home or have equity in one. You have retirement savings. You have valuable possessions. You have good credit. You have stable income. For a financially predatory man, you're not just an emotional target. You're a financial opportunity, but it goes deeper than just money. There's an emotional component that toxic men exploit ruthlessly. Many women over 40 have experienced loss. Maybe you're divorced and you carry some hurt or disappointment about how that relationship ended. Maybe you're widowed and you're grieving the loss of a life partner. Maybe you've been single for a while and you're feeling lonely or worried that your opportunity for companionship has passed. These emotional states, while completely normal and human, create vulnerability. A toxic man doesn't see a woman who's healing or hoping. He sees a woman who can be manipulated through her loneliness, her grief, her desire for connection, her hope for one last great love. He will position himself as the answer to everything you've been missing. He will seem like a miracle, like fate, like the universe finally rewarding you for your patience and suffering. There's also a cultural component we need to address. Society tells women that their value decreases with age. You've been bombarded with messages your entire life that youth equals beauty, that older women are invisible, that your best years are behind you. Even if you intellectually reject these messages, they've still done their damage. They've created a subtle insecurity, a quiet fear that maybe you are becoming less desirable, less worthy of love. A toxic man will sense this insecurity even if you don't consciously feel it, and he will weaponize it. He will make you feel seen, desired, valued in ways you haven't felt in years. He will tell you that you're beautiful, that age is just a number, that he's always been attracted to mature women. He will make you feel like you've finally found someone who appreciates you for exactly who you are. And in your relief and gratitude, you'll lower your guard. Let me also talk about something that women your age often experience: decision fatigue. You've spent decades making decisions, taking care of others, managing your life. Part of you, even if you won't admit it, is tired. You'd like someone else to take some of the weight. You'd like to be able to relax and trust someone else to handle things sometimes. This is completely normal and not a weakness. But a toxic man will offer to take over in ways that feel like relief at first. He'll make decisions, he'll handle things, he'll tell you to relax and let him take care of you. And slowly, without you realizing it, he's taking control. What felt like care becomes control. What felt like partnership becomes domination. And by the time you realize what's happened, you've lost your autonomy. Now, I also need to address the biological and psychological changes that can occur as women age. Some women in their 40s and beyond experience hormonal changes that can affect mood, energy, and even cognitive function. Perimenopause and menopause can cause brain fog, memory issues, mood swings, and decreased confidence. If you're experiencing these symptoms, a toxic man will exploit them. When you question something or express concern, he'll attribute it to your hormones, your age, your menopause. He'll make you doubt your own perceptions by linking them to your biology. Here's another factor. Many women over 40 have become successful in their careers or personal lives through being accommodating, flexible, and empathetic. You've learned that being reasonable and seeing other people's perspectives makes you effective in work and relationships. You pride yourself on not being overly dramatic or reactive. You're measured in your responses. You give people the benefit of the doubt. These are wonderful qualities that have likely served you well in many areas of life. But with a toxic man, these qualities become vulnerabilities. He will take advantage of your reasonableness. He will exploit your empathy. He will count on you to give him the benefit of the doubt again and again and again. He will use your own maturity and emotional intelligence against you. I also want to talk about something specific to women who've been married before or who've been in long-term relationships that ended. You carry wisdom from those experiences, but you also carry something else. You carry the fear of repeating the same mistakes. You might be hypervigilant about certain red flags from your previous relationship while being completely blind to different tactics. For example, if your ex-husband was loud and aggressive, you might be drawn to a man who seems calm and soft-spoken, not realizing that quiet manipulation is still manipulation. If your previous partner was financially irresponsible, you might be impressed by a man who talks confidently about money and investments, not realizing he's actually a financial predator. Your past experiences create blind spots that toxic men can exploit. There's also something I need you to understand about the dating landscape for mature women. The statistics aren't in your favor, and you probably know this. There are simply more single women than single men in your age group. Many men your age are dating younger women. The available men often come with significant baggage, health issues, or are recently divorced and not emotionally ready. This reality, while not your fault, creates a subtle desperation or sense of urgency. When you do meet a man who seems interested, available, and appropriate, there's a temptation to overlook things you wouldn't have overlooked when you had more options. You might think this is your last chance, or that you can't afford to be too picky, or that nobody's perfect so you should be grateful for what you can get. A toxic man understands this dynamic even if you don't consciously acknowledge it. He knows that you're aware the dating pool is limited. He knows that you might be more willing to compromise than you were when you were younger, and he will use this knowledge to push boundaries that should never be crossed. Let me also address the issue of sexual dynamics. As a mature woman, you likely have a better understanding of your own sexuality than you did when you were younger. You know what you like and need, but you may also be experiencing changes in your sexual desire or function due to age, hormones, or health conditions. Some women in this age group are also dealing with body image issues related to aging. A toxic man will exploit sexual dynamics in specific ways with older women. He might love bomb you with intense sexual attention early on, making you feel desired in ways you haven't felt in years. Then, once you're attached, the sexual attention will be withdrawn and used as a tool of control. Or he might criticize your body or sexual performance in subtle ways that erode your confidence. Or he might pressure you into sexual activities you're not comfortable with by making you feel like you need to prove you're still sexually relevant. Now, let's talk about adult children and family dynamics. If you have adult children, a toxic man will study how to manipulate your relationship with them. If you're close to your children, he'll work to create distance between you. He'll paint them as taking advantage of you, or being too controlling, or not respecting your right to happiness. He'll create scenarios where you have to choose between him and them. If your relationship with your adult children is already strained, he'll exploit that too. He'll position himself as the only person who really cares about you, who really understands you. He'll reinforce your sense of hurt or resentment toward your children. He'll isolate you further from the very people who might recognize that something is wrong. I want you to understand something fundamental. Everything I'm describing isn't about you being weak or foolish or naive. These vulnerability points I'm identifying exist because you're human, because you've lived, because you've experienced loss and hurt and hope. They exist because you have qualities like trust, optimism, compassion, and the capacity to love. They exist because you're a normal person navigating normal life challenges. Toxic men don't create these vulnerabilities. They just recognize them and exploit them. And they're very, very good at it. They've often been practicing these tactics for decades. They've refined their approach. They know exactly what to look for and how to exploit it. The goal of this section isn't to make you paranoid or to suggest that you should never trust anyone. The goal is awareness. When you understand why and how you might be vulnerable, you can protect yourself more effectively. You can recognize the signs earlier. You can trust your instincts even when someone is telling you that you're wrong to do so. Understanding your specific vulnerabilities as a mature woman isn't about accepting them as weaknesses. It's about recognizing them as areas where you need to be particularly vigilant. It's about knowing that a man who seems too good to be true might be specifically tailoring his approach to exploit exactly these factors in your life. Your age, your experience, your independence, your resources, your desire for connection. None of these things make you weak, but in the hands of a toxic man, they can all be used against you. That's what makes these men so dangerous. They don't attack your weaknesses, they weaponize your strengths. Love bombing and the intensity trap. Now that you understand why toxic men specifically target older women, let's talk about how they hook you in the first place. And it starts with something that feels absolutely incredible. It's called love bombing, and it's one of the most powerful and dangerous tactics in the toxic man's playbook. Love bombing is the practice of overwhelming someone with affection, attention, gifts, and promises early in a relationship. And I want to be very clear about something. This isn't just being romantic or enthusiastic. Love bombing is strategic, calculated, and excessive. It's designed to bypass your rational thinking and flood you with emotions so powerful that you become attached before you have time to evaluate whether this person is actually good for you. Here's how it typically starts with a mature woman. You meet a man, maybe online, maybe through friends, maybe in a social setting. The early conversations are pleasant. He seems interested in you. Nothing unusual, but then something shifts. Suddenly, the intensity ramps up dramatically. He starts texting you constantly. Good morning messages, how's your day going? Thinking about you. Good night messages. The frequency is flattering at first. Someone is thinking about you this much. Someone finds you this interesting. It feels good after maybe years of feeling invisible or overlooked. But it's not just the frequency. It's the content. He starts telling you things like, I've never felt this way before. There's something special about you. I can't explain it, but I feel like I've known you forever. You're different from every other woman I've met. I think the universe brought us together for a reason. Now, if a man in his 20s said these things after 2 dates, you'd recognize it as ridiculous. But this man is your age or older. He's presenting himself as mature, experienced, and sincere. He's not some kid caught up in infatuation. He's a grown man who's been in relationships before and knows what real connection feels like. So when he says these things, you take them seriously. He moves fast. By the 3rd or 4th date, he's talking about the future. He's making plans for months from now. He's discussing trips you'll take together, experiences you'll share, how he can't wait for you to meet his children or his friends. He's painting a picture of a life together, and it's exactly the life you've been hoping for. The physical affection is intense too. Not just sexual, though that's often part of it, but constant touching, hand-holding, long hugs, gazing into your eyes. He makes you feel cherished, desired, precious. If you're someone who's been touch-starved, either because you've been single for a while or because your previous relationship lacked physical affection, this feels like water in the desert. He gives you gifts, not necessarily expensive ones, though sometimes they are, but thoughtful gifts, things that show he's been listening. You mentioned you liked a particular author, and suddenly there's a book by that author. You talked about your favorite flower, and suddenly there's a bouquet on your doorstep. These gestures feel incredibly meaningful because they suggest he really pays attention, he really cares, he really wants to make you happy. He introduces you to the important people in his life quickly. You meet his friends, his family, his children. He integrates you into his life rapidly. This feels significant. It feels like commitment. It feels like he's serious about you. You interpret this as evidence that this relationship is real and lasting. He mirrors your values, your interests, your beliefs. If you mention that family is important to you, suddenly family is the most important thing to him too. If you talk about your faith, he shares that same faith or deep respect for it. If you mention a hobby you love, coincidentally, he's always wanted to learn more about that. He becomes like a perfect puzzle piece, fitting exactly into the shape of what you need. He shares vulnerabilities with you early on. He tells you about his painful divorce, his difficult childhood, his past betrayals. He positions himself as someone who's been hurt, who's been looking for someone who truly understands him. And now he's found you. This creates a powerful bond. You feel trusted. You feel special that he's opening up to you. And you feel protective of him. Now, here's why this is so dangerous for mature women specifically. When you were younger, this intensity might have seemed overwhelming or even scary. You might have questioned it or pulled back. But now, with life experience, you interpret this intensity differently. You think, this is what mature love looks like. This is what happens when two emotionally available adults who know what they want find each other. This is the kind of connection you have when you're not playing games anymore. This is what you've been waiting for all along. You're also more likely to have read articles or books about how men show love differently, how you should appreciate when a man makes effort, how you shouldn't be too guarded or you'll miss out on love. You've been told that being jaded or overly cautious will prevent you from finding happiness. So when this man shows up with all this intensity, you tell yourself to be open, to embrace it, to not sabotage something good because of past hurt. But here's what's actually happening. Love bombing creates a psychological state called euphoric bonding. Your brain is literally being flooded with dopamine, oxytocin, and other feel-good chemicals. You're experiencing a natural high, and just like any drug, you quickly become addicted to that feeling. You become addicted to him. This is why love bombing is so effective. It's not about genuinely caring for you. It's about creating such an intense emotional experience that you form an attachment before you have time to evaluate whether this person is actually safe, trustworthy, or healthy for you. The love bombing phase typically lasts anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. During this time, you're not seeing the real person. You're seeing a performance. He's showing you exactly what you want to see. He's studied you, learned what you need, and he's providing it in overwhelming amounts. And here's the truly insidious part. During this love bombing phase, things will happen that should be red flags. But you won't see them as red flags because you're in this euphoric state. He might say something dismissive about women. He might show a flash of anger. He might violate a small boundary. He might tell a story that doesn't quite add up. You'll notice these things, but you'll dismiss them. You'll tell yourself, everyone has bad moments. I'm being too judgmental. He was probably just having a bad day. That's not who he really is. I need to focus on all the good things, not nitpick. You're so flooded with positive feelings that you rationalize away anything that conflicts with the perfect image he's creating. This is also when he starts to isolate you, but in ways that feel romantic. He wants to spend all his time with you. He says things like, "I just want you all to myself. Can't we skip that party and just be together? I feel like I have to share you with everyone else." He makes you feel so desired that you start canceling plans with friends, putting off family obligations, neglecting hobbies and interests, all so you can spend more time with him. You don't realize what's happening. You think you're just caught up in the excitement of new love. You tell yourself you'll balance things out later, once the relationship settles down. But that's exactly what he's counting on. He's counting on you prioritizing him above everything else, establishing that pattern early, so that by the time the mask starts to slip, you're already isolated. Let me tell you what love bombing is not. It's not a man being genuinely excited about you and showing healthy interest. It's not thoughtful gestures or expressing affection. The difference is in the intensity, the speed, and most importantly, the inconsistency. A healthy man who's genuinely interested in you will show consistent, sustainable interest. He'll be thoughtful and affectionate, but he won't overwhelm you. He'll want to spend time with you, but he'll understand that you have a life and responsibilities. He'll express feelings as they develop naturally, not declare soulmate-level connection after 2 weeks. He'll introduce you to his life gradually, in ways that feel organic, and most importantly, his behavior will remain consistent over time. He won't suddenly withdraw or change once he's secured your attachment. With love bombing, the intensity is not sustainable, and it's not meant to be. It's a trap. Once you're caught, once you're attached, once you've reorganized your life around him, the behavior will change. The love bombing phase will end, and a very different phase will begin. But by then, you're hooked, you're invested, you've already fallen in love with the person he pretended to be, and you'll spend months or years trying to get that person back, not realizing that person never existed in the first place. I want you to understand something crucial. The intensity of the love bombing phase is specifically designed to be addictive. It creates a peak, emotional experience that becomes your baseline for what the relationship should feel like. So when the inevitable devaluation starts, when he begins to pull away or criticize or create distance, you'll do anything to get back to that initial feeling. You'll change yourself, ignore your needs, accept poor treatment, all in hopes of recreating those early days. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the most powerful tools of psychological manipulation. Once he's established what the relationship can feel like at its best, he can control you by occasionally giving you glimpses of that intensity again. Every now and then, he'll have a day where he's loving and attentive like he was in the beginning, and that one day will be enough to keep you hooked for another month of poor treatment. Let me give you some specific examples of what love bombing might look like with older women. He might say things like, "I wasted so much time in my previous marriage with someone who didn't appreciate me. But you understand me in ways she never did. I feel like I finally found my true partner." Or he might say, "I've dated so many women, but they were all so shallow or immature. You're different. You have substance. You have depth. I feel like I can finally have real conversations about life and meaning." He might tell you, "I never thought I'd feel this way again at this age. I thought my chance for real love had passed. But then I met you and I realized I was just waiting for the right person." These statements are powerful because they validate you. They make you feel chosen. They make you feel like your age and experience are assets, not liabilities. They make you feel like you've finally been recognized for who you really are. And that feeling is so powerful that it blinds you to the manipulation underneath. Another tactic with mature women is the caretaker trap. He might present himself as someone who needs you. He'll talk about his struggles, his health issues, his difficult circumstances. He'll make you feel like you're his savior, his anchor, the one person who can really help him. For women who've spent their lives taking care of others, this triggers a deep need to be needed. You'll bond to him through caretaking, not realizing that you're being manipulated into a role that will drain you. Or there's the financial flash. He might present himself as financially successful or stable. He might take you to nice restaurants, book expensive hotels, talk about his investments or business ventures. For women who've struggled financially or who are worried about financial security in retirement, this creates a sense of safety. You think you've found someone who can be a true partner, someone who won't be a financial burden. Later, you'll discover that the financial picture he painted was largely fiction, but by then, you're already in deep. Here's what I need you to take away from this section. If someone's interest in you feels too intense, too fast, too perfect, it probably is. Your instincts are trying to tell you something. That little voice that says, "This seems too good to be true," listen to it. That feeling of being slightly overwhelmed by the intensity. Pay attention to it. Love bombing works because it gives you everything you've been hoping for all at once. But real love doesn't work that way. Real love builds gradually. Real love is consistent. Real love respects your pace and your boundaries. Real love doesn't overwhelm you or isolate you or make you feel like you need to drop everything else in your life. If a man is genuinely interested in building a lasting relationship with you, he'll be patient. He'll want to know you over time, not possess you immediately. He'll encourage your other relationships, not draw you away from them. He'll express feelings that match the actual stage of your relationship, not project years into the future after a few dates. The intensity of love bombing feels like passion, but it's not passion, it's possession. And once he possesses you, everything changes. Future faking and the promise trap. Once a toxic man has hooked you with love bombing, the next tactic he'll employ is something called future faking. And for mature women who are thinking about their legacy, their remaining years, and what they want the next chapter of their lives to look like, future faking is devastatingly effective. Future faking is the practice of making elaborate promises and plans about the future with no intention of following through. It's about painting a picture of a life together that keeps you invested in the relationship, even when present-day reality isn't matching those promises. Here's how it typically unfolds. Early in the relationship, he starts talking about the future you'll share. And these aren't vague mentions. These are detailed, specific plans that sound absolutely wonderful. He talks about trips you'll take together. He describes them in detail. The villa in Tuscany where you'll drink wine and watch sunsets. The cruise to Alaska to see the glaciers before they're gone. The trip to visit his family in Ireland where you'll trace his ancestry together. He makes these plans feel real. He looks at dates. He mentions specific locations. He talks about what you'll do there. He talks about where you'll live. Maybe he suggests you move in together, or that you should sell both your places and buy something new that's really yours as a couple. He describes the house, the garden you'll have, the kitchen where you'll cook together, the porch where you'll sit with morning coffee. He makes you see it, feel it, want it. He talks about retirement plans, how you'll finally have time to enjoy life together, how you'll volunteer together, or take up hobbies, or travel extensively. He incorporates himself into your vision of your future so thoroughly that you can't imagine those years without him. He talks about family blending. He describes holidays with all your children and grandchildren together. He talks about becoming a step-grandfather to your grandkids or a father figure to your adult children. He weaves himself into the fabric of your family in your imagination. He might talk about business or financial plans, starting a business together, investing in property, writing a book or starting a project that combines both your talents. He makes you feel like you're building something together, like you're partners in creating a future. For mature women, these future promises are incredibly powerful. You're at a stage of life where the future is finite and precious. You're thinking about how you want to spend your remaining healthy, active years. You're thinking about legacy and meaning. You're thinking about companionship as you age. When someone comes along and offers you a beautiful vision of those years, it's almost irresistible. The future faking serves several purposes for the toxic man. First, it keeps you invested. As long as you believe these plans are real, you'll tolerate present-day problems. You'll think, yes, things are hard right now, but we're building towards something wonderful. You'll accept his current bad behavior as temporary, as something you need to get through on the way to that perfect future he's promised. Second, it keeps you from leaving. Even when red flags pile up, even when you're unhappy, even when your friends and family are expressing concerns, you stay because of all these plans. You think about the trip you've planned for next year. You think about the house you're going to buy together. You think about the retirement you've envisioned. Walking away means giving up that future, and it's a future you've become emotionally invested in. Third, it gets you to make commitments and sacrifices. You might sell your house because you're planning to move in together. You might turn down a job opportunity because it would interfere with the travel plans you've made. You might lend him money for a business venture you're supposedly doing together. You might co-sign a loan because your partner's building a future. All of this is based on promises he has no intention of keeping. Here's what future faking looks like in real time with older women. Let's say you mention that you've always wanted to visit Paris. Within days, he's planning an entire trip. He's looking at flights. He's finding hotels. He's making lists of places you'll visit. He makes it feel so real that you start telling people about it. You start looking forward to it. You might even start learning French or buying guidebooks. But then the trip never happens. There's always a reason. His work situation changed. His finances aren't quite ready. There's a family emergency. His ex-wife is causing problems with his kids, and he needs to be around. The excuse sounds reasonable, and he reassures you that the trip is just postponed, not cancelled. You'll definitely go, just not right now. And because you want to believe him, because you want that trip, you accept the excuse. This pattern repeats with every promise. The move-in date keeps getting pushed back. The business you're starting together never quite gets off the ground. The big family gathering he promised keeps getting postponed. There's always a reason, always an excuse that sounds legitimate enough that you can't quite call it a lie. Meanwhile, you're living in a constant state of anticipation. You're always waiting for the wonderful future to start. You're tolerating a mediocre or even miserable present because you believe something better is coming. You're in a holding pattern, and your life is on pause while you wait for these promises to materialize. Another aspect of future faking specifically targets mature women's desire for security and partnership in aging. He might talk about healthcare and aging in place together. He'll say things like, "When we get old, we'll take care of each other. If one of us gets sick, we'll be there. We'll make sure neither of us ends up alone in a nursing home." For women who fear aging alone, who worry about who will be there if they get sick, who dread the thought of deteriorating health without support, these promises feel like a life raft. You'll stay with someone who's treating you poorly right now because you're terrified of facing illness and old age alone, and he's promised you won't have to. He might also future fake about financial security. He'll talk about combining resources, about making sure you're both taken care of. He might promise that if anything happens to him, you'll be provided for. He might talk about estate planning, wills, beneficiaries. He makes you feel like you're building financial security together. But these conversations never translate into actual action. The documents never get signed. The accounts never get combined in the ways he described. It stays in the realm of talk. For women who've experienced financial instability or who are worried about retirement, these promises feel crucial. You make decisions based on a financial future you think you're building together. You might not save as aggressively because you think you have a partner to share expenses with. You might not make certain investments because you think you're planning a different financial future together. Here's another way future faking manifests with older women. The promise of experiencing things you missed. Maybe you got married young and never had certain experiences. Maybe you were so focused on career and kids that you didn't do certain things. He'll promise to give you those experiences now. He'll talk about being adventurous together, trying new things, making up for lost time. And this narrative is so appealing. The idea that it's not too late, that you can still have those experiences, that you don't have to resign yourself to a quiet, limited life. But those experiences never come. Or if they do, they come in small, unsatisfying doses that keep you hungry for more. Just enough to keep the promise alive, but never enough to fulfill it. I want to talk about something particularly cruel: the grandchildren promise. If you're a woman with grandchildren, or hoping for grandchildren, a toxic man might insert himself into that narrative. He'll talk about what a great grandfather he'll be. He'll describe holidays with the grandkids. He'll make plans for college funds or special trips with them. He bonds with your grandchildren, or promises to. This is devastating because now it's not just about you and him. You start thinking about what your grandchildren are losing if you leave. You worry about disappointing them. You feel guilty about breaking promises that involve them. He's used your grandchildren as emotional hostages. Here's how you recognize future faking. First, look at the ratio of talk to action. A person with genuine intentions will follow through, at least on some things. There will be concrete steps toward the future being discussed. Flights will actually be booked. Money will actually be saved. Papers will actually be signed. There will be tangible progress. With future faking, it's all talk and no action. Every promise comes with an excuse for why it hasn't happened yet. And the excuses always make just enough sense that you can't definitively say he's lying, but things never actually move forward. Second, notice if the promises escalate when you express doubt or try to leave. If you bring up concerns about the relationship, does he suddenly bring up all the wonderful plans you have? Does he remind you of the future you're building? Does he make new, even bigger promises to keep you engaged? This is a key indicator that the promises are manipulation, not genuine intent. Third, look at whether the promises require action from you, but not from him. Are you the one making sacrifices, taking risks, or investing resources based on these future plans, while he remains relatively unaffected? Are you selling your house while he keeps his? Are you putting money into joint plans while his finances remain separate? Are you making life changes while his life stays the same? Fourth, notice if the promised future keeps shifting. Does the timeline keep changing? Do the details keep altering? Does the vision of your future together seem to be a moving target that you can never quite reach? This inconsistency is a sign that the promises are being made up on the spot, not based on genuine planning. Let me tell you why future faking is so psychologically damaging, especially for mature women. At this stage of life, time itself is more precious. You're aware of mortality in ways you weren't when you were younger. Every year that you spend waiting for a future that never comes is a year you can't get back. The opportunity cost is enormous. Also, future faking often prevents you from making important life decisions. You don't move to be closer to your kids because you're planning a different move with him. You don't pursue a business opportunity because you're planning to start something with him. You don't date other people because you're committed to this future together. You don't make alternative retirement plans because you think you're planning retirement with him. Your whole life is on hold for a future that's never going to arrive. When you finally realize you've been future faked, the loss is immense. It's not just the loss of the relationship. It's the loss of the future you envisioned. It's the loss of time you spent waiting. It's the loss of opportunities you turned down. It's the loss of the person you could have become if you hadn't been distracted by false promises. The grief is overwhelming. Here's what you need to know. A man who genuinely wants a future with you will take concrete actions to build that future. He won't just talk about it, he'll do something about it. He'll match his words with behaviors. He'll include you in actual planning, not just dreaming. And he'll follow through at least on some of the plans you make together. A man who is future faking will keep you suspended in possibility without ever delivering reality. He'll keep you hoping, waiting, believing, while your present continues to be unsatisfying and your future remains perpetually out of reach. If you're with someone who makes beautiful promises but never delivers, who always has an excuse for why things haven't happened yet, who keeps moving the goalposts further and further away, you're being future faked. And every day you stay is another day of your precious, finite life being wasted on a future that will never materialize. The hard truth is this: when someone shows you through consistent action that their promises are empty, believe that. Don't keep waiting. Don't keep hoping. Don't keep sacrificing your present for a future he has no intention of giving you. Your time is too valuable. Your life is too important. You deserve a present that's fulfilling, not an endless wait for a future that never comes. Gaslighting and reality manipulation. Now we need to talk about one of the most psychologically damaging tactics toxic men use against older women. It's called gaslighting, and if you've heard this term before but aren't quite sure what it means or how it operates, pay very close attention to this section. Gaslighting can literally make you feel like you're losing your mind. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you question your own reality, memory, and perceptions. It's named after an old movie where a husband manipulates his wife into thinking she's going insane. The goal of gaslighting is to destabilize your sense of reality to the point where you depend on the gaslighter to tell you what's true and what's not. With mature women, gaslighting is particularly effective and particularly cruel. You've lived long enough to trust your judgment. You've made major life decisions. You've raised children, managed careers, navigated complex situations. You trust your ability to perceive reality accurately, and that's exactly what makes gaslighting so devastating. It attacks the very foundation of your confidence in yourself. Here's how gaslighting typically manifests. It starts small. He says something or does something that bothers you. When you bring it up, he denies it happened the way you remember it. He doesn't just disagree with your interpretation. He tells you the event itself didn't happen the way you recall. For example, maybe he made a rude comment about your appearance. You were hurt and waited until a calm moment to address it. But when you bring it up, he says, "I never said that. You're completely misremembering. I would never say something like that to you. You must be thinking of something else." Now, you distinctly remember this comment. You remember where you were, what you were doing, how it made you feel. But he's so confident in his denial. He seems genuinely confused about why you think this happened. You start to doubt yourself. Maybe you did misremember. Maybe you misheard. Maybe you were overly sensitive and interpreted something innocent as insulting. This is the first seed of doubt, and once that seed is planted, it grows. The next time something similar happens, you're less certain of your memory. You second-guess yourself. You think, well, I was wrong last time. Maybe I'm wrong again. Let me give you specific examples of gaslighting with older women. One common tactic involves exploiting normal age-related memory changes. If you occasionally forget things or need to write things down, which is completely normal, he'll use this against you. He'll say things like, "Your memory isn't what it used to be. We never made plans for tonight. You must be confused." Or, "I told you about this last week. Don't you remember? This is the third time I've had to explain this to you. Are you feeling okay? Maybe you should see a doctor." About your memory. Now, It's possible you did forget a conversation, but the gaslighter will exploit your occasional normal forgetfulness to make you doubt yourself constantly. He'll claim he told you things he never told you. He'll deny conversations that definitely happened. He'll change plans and then insist the plans were always what he's now saying. And every time you're confused, he attributes it to your failing memory. This is especially cruel because many women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are indeed experiencing perimenopause or menopause, which can affect memory and concentration. You might already be worried about cognitive decline. A gaslighter will weaponize this fear. He'll make you think you're becoming incompetent, forgetful, unreliable. You'll start doubting every memory, every perception, every thought. Another gaslighting tactic involves your emotional reactions. Let's say he does something that hurts you. Maybe he flirts with another woman in front of. Maybe he cancels plans at the last minute again. Maybe he makes a decision about something that affects both of you without consulting you. When you express hurt or frustration, he tells you you're overreacting. But he doesn't just say you're overreacting. He makes it about something wrong with you. He says you're being too sensitive, you're too emotional, you're taking this too personally, you're making a big deal out of nothing, you always do this, you look for reasons to be upset, you're so dramatic, I can't say anything without you getting offended. He shifts the focus from his behavior to your reaction. Soon, you're not discussing what he did, you're defending your right to have feelings. You're trying to convince him that your emotional response is valid. You're apologizing for being upset, and in doing so, the original issue gets completely lost. Over time, you stop bringing up things that bother you because you don't want to be labeled as too sensitive or emotional. You internalize his message that your feelings are excessive. You start policing your own emotions, trying to be less reactive, less sensitive, more understanding. You make yourself smaller and smaller to avoid being accused of being too much. Here's another gaslighting tactic: denying his actions and attributing malicious intent to you. Let's say you find evidence of something concerning, maybe inappropriate messages on his phone, maybe suspicious charges on a credit card, maybe he's been somewhere he said he wouldn't be. When you confront him with evidence, he doesn't just deny the concerning behavior. He attacks you for discovering it. He'll say, "You're going through my phone? You're checking up on me? What's wrong with you? Don't you trust me? You're paranoid. You're trying to control me. You're acting crazy." Suddenly, the issue isn't what he was doing. The issue is that you violated his privacy by finding out about it. He makes you the villain in the story. Or maybe there's no evidence, just a gut feeling. You sense something is off. You feel like he's being dishonest. When you express this feeling, he tells you you're being paranoid, jealous, insecure. He says, "Where is this coming from? Why are you imagining things? You're sabotaging this relationship with your insecurity. If you keep this up, you're going to push me away." He makes you responsible for the relationship problems. You're not identifying a real issue. You're creating a problem with your paranoia. And the crazy part is, your gut feeling is probably right. But you've been made to feel so guilty and crazy for having it that you abandon your instincts and apologize to him. Let me tell you about a particularly insidious form of gaslighting called ambient gaslighting. This is where the gaslighter makes you doubt your perception of his feelings and intentions. He'll be cold, withdrawn, or obviously upset. You can sense the tension. You can feel that something is wrong. When you ask about it, he says, "Nothing's wrong. I'm fine. I don't know what you're talking about." But his tone, his body language, his behavior all contradict his words. The coldness continues. So you ask again, more gently, "Are you sure everything's okay? You seem upset with me." And he gets irritated. "Why are you always analyzing me? I said I'm fine. You're imagining things." Now you're in an impossible position. You can clearly perceive that something is wrong, but he's telling you nothing is wrong. You're experiencing tension, but you're being told there is no tension. Your reality and his stated reality don't match. This is crazy making. It makes you feel like you can't trust your own perceptions. Often, this is a form of passive-aggressive punishment. He is upset with you, but instead of communicating directly, he creates a hostile environment while denying that anything is wrong. You end up walking on eggshells, trying to figure out what you did wrong, trying to fix a problem he won't acknowledge exists. Here's another example specific to older women: gaslighting about financial matters. Maybe you've combined finances or given him access to your money. You notice irregularities, money missing, unexplained charges. When you ask about it, he has explanations that sort of make sense but don't quite add up. When you express continued concern, he makes it about your competence. He says, "You don't understand how finances work. I've been managing money successfully for decades. You're worried about nothing. You don't understand this transaction because you're not familiar with investment structures. You need to trust me. I know what I'm doing." He uses complexity as a weapon. He makes you feel stupid for not understanding. He makes you feel like questioning him means you're financially illiterate. Meanwhile, he might be stealing from you, mismanaging money, or creating financial chaos. But you're so focused on not appearing incompetent that you stop asking questions. Gaslighting also operates through rewriting history. A gaslighter will change the narrative of your relationship over time. Early in the relationship, he told you he'd never been happier, that you were perfect for him, that he'd been looking for you his whole life. But months later, when things are bad, he'll say things like, "I never wanted this to move so fast. You pushed for commitment before I was ready. I had doubts from the beginning, but you wouldn't listen." Wait, what? That's not at all how it happened. You remember that he was the one pushing for commitment, making plans, declaring feelings. But he's now rewriting that history to make you responsible for the relationship's problems. And because it was months ago, because you didn't document every conversation, because memory can be imperfect, you start to doubt yourself. Maybe he did express concerns and you ignored them. Maybe you did push too hard. This rewriting of history is particularly damaging because it changes the meaning of your shared experiences. Moments you thought were meaningful, he now claims were something else entirely. Times when you thought you were both happy, he now says he was already unhappy. You can't trust your own history with him. Your past together becomes unstable, manipulable. Let me explain the psychological mechanism that makes gaslighting so effective. When someone you love and trust contradicts your reality repeatedly, you experience cognitive dissonance. Your brain is trying to hold two opposing beliefs simultaneously. One, that your perception is accurate. Two, that this person you care about is telling the truth. These can't both be true. To resolve this dissonance, you have two choices. You can decide he's lying and manipulating you, or you can decide your perception is flawed. For most people, especially in the early stages before they realize they're being abused, the second option feels less threatening. It's less scary to think you're misremembering than to think someone you love is deliberately manipulating you. So you resolve the dissonance by doubting yourself. Each time you make this choice, it becomes easier to doubt yourself the next time. A pattern develops where your reality consistently takes a backseat to his version of events. Eventually, you stop trusting your own mind at all. You defer to him on everything. You think, well, I can't even trust my own memory or perception, so I need him to tell me what's real. This is the goal. This is what he's working toward. Complete dependence on him as the arbiter of reality. Once you reach this state, he can do almost anything, and you'll doubt yourself before you doubt him. Now, let me talk about why gaslighting is particularly damaging to older women. You've spent your entire life developing your judgment and trusting your perceptions. Your sense of self is built on your competence, your experience, your ability to assess situations accurately. Gaslighting dismantles all of that. It reduces you to a state of uncertainty and dependence that you haven't felt since you were very young. Also, as I mentioned earlier, many older women are already dealing with normal age-related changes or are worried about cognitive decline. They might have watched a parent develop dementia or Alzheimer's. The fear of losing mental capacity is very real. A gaslighter exploits this fear ruthlessly. He makes you think you're already losing your grip on reality, that you're already becoming incompetent. This can lead to genuine psychological damage. Women who've been gaslit for extended periods can develop anxiety, depression, and even symptoms that mimic cognitive disorders. They become so uncertain of their own judgment that they struggle to make any decisions. They become paralyzed with self-doubt. They develop genuine memory problems because they're in a constant state of stress and confusion. The other thing that makes gaslighting particularly effective with older women is that you're more likely to be living alone with this person. Your children are grown and gone. You don't have roommates. There aren't other witnesses to your daily interactions. He can create an entire alternate reality in your private shared space, and there's no one else to validate your perceptions. If you were younger and living with roommates or still living with family, other people might notice the gaslighting. They might say, "Wait, that's not what happened. I was there. He definitely said that." But when you're alone with him, there's no external reality check. It's just your memory against his version of events. Here's how you can recognize if you're being gaslit. First, you constantly second-guess yourself. You've become very uncertain about things you used to feel confident about. You frequently think things like, "Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe I'm overreacting." Second, you find yourself constantly apologizing, often for things that aren't actually your fault. You apologize for bringing things up. You apologize for having feelings. You apologize for needing things. You apologize for being confused. Third, you make excuses for his behavior to yourself and others. When people express concern about how he treats you, you defend him. You explain away things that are actually unacceptable. You tell yourself he didn't mean it that way, or you're being too sensitive, or he's under a lot of stress. Fourth, you feel confused most of the time. You have trouble making simple decisions. You don't trust your own judgment anymore. You feel like you need his input on everything because you can't trust yourself. Fifth, you know something is deeply wrong in the relationship, but you can't quite articulate what it is. You feel crazy. You feel like you're losing your mind. You wonder if you're the problem. Sixth, you've noticed that you can't have a productive conversation with him. Every time you try to address an issue, the conversation gets turned around until you're apologizing or defending yourself. Problems never get resolved, they just get reframed as your fault. Seventh, you find yourself constantly trying to prove things to him or to yourself. You start documenting things. You save messages. You write things down to prove to yourself they happened. You feel like you need evidence for your own life. Eighth, you feel isolated from your own life. You've lost touch with your sense of self. You don't recognize yourself anymore. You feel like you're living in a fog. If you're experiencing these things, you're likely being gaslit. And I need you to understand something crucial. This is not happening because you're weak or foolish or actually losing your mind. This is happening because someone is systematically manipulating your sense of reality for their own purposes. Gaslighting is psychological abuse. It's designed to control you by destroying your confidence in yourself. And it works because it's subtle. Each individual incident seems small enough to explain away. But the cumulative effect is devastating. Here's what you need to do if you realize you're being gaslit. Start documenting everything. Write down conversations immediately after they happen. Save messages. Take screenshots. Create a timeline. This isn't about proving something to him. This is about creating an external reality check for yourself. Talk to people you trust. Tell them specific incidents, not generalities. Ask them if your perception seems reasonable. Listen when they express concern. Trust their perspective, especially if multiple people are seeing the same problems. Consider recording conversations if legal in your area. Sometimes you need to hear your own conversation played back to recognize the manipulation. Most importantly, trust yourself. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. If you remember something happening, it probably happened. If you feel hurt by something, that hurt is valid regardless of whether he acknowledges the incident occurred. And understand this: you cannot fix gaslighting by being more understanding or less sensitive. You cannot prove your perception is correct because he's not operating in good faith. He's not confused about what happened. He knows. He's lying. And he's lying because control and manipulation are his goals. The only solution to gaslighting is to remove yourself from the relationship. You cannot have a healthy relationship with someone who is intentionally destroying your sense of reality. You cannot build a life with someone who makes you doubt your own mind. You cannot grow old with someone who uses your fears about aging and cognitive decline as weapons against you. If you're being gaslit, you need to leave. Not later. Not after you prove what's happening. Not after he admits it. Now. Because every day you stay is another day of damage to your psychological health. Every day you stay makes it harder to trust yourself again. Your mind is not failing. Your perception is not wrong. Your memory is not broken. You're being deliberately manipulated by someone who is supposed to love you. And that's not something you can fix. It's not something you should try to fix. It's something you need to escape. Financial exploitation and economic abuse. We need to talk about something that many people don't recognize as abuse. Financial exploitation. When we think of abusive relationships, we typically think of physical violence or emotional cruelty. But financial abuse is one of the most common and devastating forms of abuse that toxic men perpetrate against older women. And because money is still a somewhat taboo subject, because women often feel ashamed about financial mistakes, this abuse happens in silence. Let me be very clear about what financial exploitation looks like. It's any behavior that controls, manipulates, or steals your financial resources. It can be overt, like forging your signature or stealing money from your accounts. Or it can be subtle, like gradually eroding your financial independence or creating a situation where you're financially dependent on someone who then controls you through that dependence. For mature women, financial exploitation is particularly dangerous because you're at a stage of life where financial security is crucial. You're thinking about retirement. You're likely on a fixed income or planning for one. You may have accumulated significant assets over your lifetime. You don't have decades left to rebuild if your finances are destroyed. The stakes are much higher than they were when you were younger. Let me walk you through the common patterns of financial exploitation with older women. Often, it starts during the love bombing phase. He appears financially stable or even successful. He might pay for dates, buy gifts, present himself as someone who has his financial life together. This creates a sense of security. You think you're partnering with someone responsible, but pay attention to the details. Where does his money actually come from? Does he have a verifiable job? Does his spending match his stated income? If he's supposedly successful but there's no concrete evidence of that success, that's a red flag. Some financially exploitative men will actually use money as a love-bombing tool. They'll spend lavishly early on, creating an impression of wealth. They might take you on expensive trips, buy you extravagant gifts, pay for costly experiences. You're swept up in the romance of it. You feel cherished. You feel like you've found someone generous and successful. But here's what's actually happening. He's either spending money he doesn't have, meaning he's going into debt to create this illusion, Or he's spending money he does have very strategically, knowing that this investment will pay off when he eventually gains access to your resources. Or, and this is particularly sinister, he's spending your money without you realizing it yet. Once you're attached, once you're in love, the financial exploitation begins in earnest. Here are the tactics you need to watch for. The first tactic is the sob story. He has a financial crisis. He lost his job. His ex-wife is taking him to the cleaners. He has medical bills he can't pay. His car broke down. His business is going through a rough patch. He just needs help getting through this temporary situation. He'll pay you back, he promises. For women who've been taught to be supportive partners, who value loyalty and standing by your man through hard times, this triggers a deep desire to help. You don't want to be the kind of person who abandons someone when they're struggling. You want to show that you're a good partner, that you believe in him, that you're there for better or worse. So you help. You loan him money. You pay his bills. You cover his rent. You buy him things he needs. You tell yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself this is what partners do. You tell yourself he'd do the same for you. But here's the thing. The crisis never ends. As soon as one situation is resolved, there's another. He never quite gets back on his feet. There's always another emergency, another unexpected expense, another reason he needs help, and he never pays you back. When you bring up repayment, he either says he will soon but doesn't, or he gets defensive about you keeping score, or he reminds you of something he did for you and suggests you're even. The second tactic is the joint venture. He proposes that you invest in something together, a business, a property, a project. He paints a beautiful picture of the returns you'll get. He makes it sound like a partnership, like you're building something together. This aligns perfectly with the future faking we discussed earlier. You invest your money. You might liquidate savings, take out loans, or use retirement funds, but somehow the investment is structured in a way that's primarily in his name, or that he controls, or that you can't easily access. When the venture fails, or when you break up, you discover that your money is gone and you have no recourse to recover it. The third tactic is the slow takeover of your finances. This is more subtle but incredibly common. It starts with him offering to help. He says your finances are complicated and he can help you organize them. Or he suggests you're not making the best investment decisions and he can do better. Or he says you're working too hard managing everything and he wants to lighten your load. At first, this feels like partnership. He's taking an interest. He's offering to help. He's being supportive. You might give him access to one account, or you might agree to put him on your credit card for emergencies, or you might make him an authorized user, or you might give him your passwords so he can help you with online banking. Gradually, he takes over more and more. He starts handling your bills. He makes financial decisions without consulting you. He moves money between accounts. When you ask about finances, he tells you not to worry. He's got it handled. You should focus on other things. You might feel relieved at first. Financial management can be stressful. It's nice to have someone else take that on. But then things start to feel off. You don't quite know where your money is going. You're not sure what you have anymore. When you try to access accounts, passwords have been changed. When you ask questions, he gets defensive or evasive. By the time you realize what's happening, he has complete control of your finances. He might be stealing from you outright, or he might be controlling your access to your own money, or he might be making terrible financial decisions that benefit him but hurt you. And you feel helpless because you allowed it to happen. You gave him access, and now you don't know how to take back control. The fourth tactic is the undermining of your financial independence. Maybe you have a job or a business. He starts criticizing it. He says you work too hard. He says your job doesn't appreciate you. He says you're stressed and it's affecting your health. He says you should quit and let him take care of you, or that you should at least cut back your hours. This sounds loving. He wants you to be less stressed. He wants to take care of you. But what he's actually doing is making you financially dependent on him. Once you quit your job or reduce your income, you're vulnerable. You need him financially, and he can use that need to control you. Or maybe you own property. He suggests you sell it. Maybe he says you don't need 2 houses, or that the maintenance is too much for you, or that you should use the equity to invest in something else. If you sell, you might put the money into something he controls, or you might spend it on joint expenses, or it might simply disappear. But either way, you've lost a major asset and a form of independence. The 5th tactic is running up debt in your name. He convinces you to take out loans. He asks you to co-sign for him. He uses your credit cards. He forges your signature on financial documents. He opens accounts in your name without your knowledge. You might not even know about some of this until you're denied credit or until creditors start calling. This is particularly devastating because bad credit and debt can affect you for years. Even after you leave the relationship, you're stuck with the financial consequences. You can't buy a house. You can't get loans. You might even struggle to rent an apartment or get certain jobs. He's destroyed your financial future. The 6th tactic is the exploitation of your assets after death. This is particularly sinister. He might pressure you to change your will, to make him a beneficiary on your life insurance or retirement accounts, to put him on deeds to your property, to list him as a beneficiary. He frames this as what committed couples do. He might say that if you really loved him, you'd want to make sure he's taken care of if something happens to you. For older women, especially those with health issues, this tactic is terrifying because you might actually be concerned about mortality. You might be thinking about estate planning anyway, and he inserts himself into that process in ways that benefit him and potentially disinherit your children or other intended beneficiaries. If you die or become incapacitated, he's set himself up to inherit everything. Your children might find themselves fighting legal battles to protect their inheritance, and if you don't die but you break up, you have to go through the process of undoing all these financial entanglements, which can be costly and complicated. Let me talk about some specific scenarios that are common with mature women. The live-in boyfriend who doesn't contribute. You're retired or close to retirement. You own your home. You meet a man who seems lovely. Things progress, and he moves in with you. But he doesn't contribute to household expenses, or does so minimally. He's living in your home, eating your food, using your utilities, wearing out your possessions, but not paying his fair share. When you bring it up, he has excuses. He's between jobs. His pension doesn't stretch far enough. He needs to save for something. He does other things to contribute. He deflects and makes you feel petty for keeping track. Meanwhile, your expenses have increased because of his presence, but your income hasn't. You're effectively subsidizing his life. Or there's the scenario where he convinces you to fund his business or project. He has a brilliant idea. He just needs startup capital. You could be an investor, a partner. He'll pay you back with interest, or you'll share in the profits. The potential returns sound incredible. You invest, but the business never quite gets off the ground, or it fails quickly, or it turns out to have been a scam from the beginning. Your money is gone. The promised returns never materialize. And often, you can't even prove where the money went because there are no proper records, no legitimate business entity, no paper trail. Here's another common scenario. The reverse mortgage or home equity loan suggestion. You own your home outright, a major source of security. He suggests taking out a reverse mortgage or home equity loan. He has various justifications. You could use the money to enjoy your retirement. You could make home improvements. You could invest it and get returns. You're sitting on equity that could be working for you. If you agree, suddenly there's a loan against your house, and that money has a way of disappearing. It goes to joint expenses. It goes to his needs. It goes to investments that fail. You've now put your home at risk. If you can't make the payments on a home equity loan, you could lose your house. If you took a reverse mortgage, you've reduced or eliminated your equity and your heirs' inheritance. Let me talk about why financial exploitation is so damaging specifically to older women. First, as I mentioned, you don't have time to rebuild. A woman in her 20s who loses money to a boyfriend has decades to recover financially. But if you're in your 50s or 60s and you lose your retirement savings, your home equity, your assets, you might never recover. You might face poverty in your old age. Second, financial exploitation can destroy relationships with your family. If your adult children see their inheritance being stolen or see you being financially manipulated, it creates enormous family conflict. They might try to intervene and be accused of being greedy or controlling, or they might distance themselves in frustration. Either way, your relationship with them suffers. Third, financial abuse creates vulnerability to other forms of abuse. When you're financially dependent on someone, when they control the resources, you can't easily leave. You don't have money for your own place. You can't afford a lawyer. You might not even be able to afford basic necessities without them. This dependence traps you in an abusive relationship. Fourth, the shame and embarrassment of financial exploitation keeps women silent. You're supposed to be wise with money at your age. You're supposed to know better. Admitting that you've been financially manipulated feels humiliating, so women hide it, don't report it, don't seek help. They suffer in silence while the exploitation continues. How do you protect yourself financially? First, never give someone access to your finances early in a relationship. No matter how wonderful they seem, no matter how much you trust them, keep your finances separate until you've been together for a significant time and have verifiable reason to trust them with that access. And even then, think carefully before merging finances. Second, maintain your own accounts that only you control. Even if you have joint accounts for household expenses, you should have accounts in your name only that your partner cannot access. You need an escape fund. You need financial independence. Third, do not loan money to a romantic partner, especially early in the relationship. If someone needs financial help repeatedly, they're not a partner. They're a dependent or a con artist. Neither is appropriate for a romantic relationship. Fourth, do not co-sign loans. Do not put property in joint names until you're legally married, and even then think carefully about it. Do not add someone to your credit cards. Do not give out passwords or account numbers. These are bright lines that should not be crossed. Fifth, maintain your income sources. Do not quit your job or sell your business or sell your property because a partner suggests it. These decisions should be yours alone, based on your needs and goals, not on someone else's preference or pressure. Sixth, do not change estate planning documents without consulting your own attorney and your family. If a partner is pressuring you to change your will or beneficiaries, that's a massive red flag. Your estate planning should reflect your wishes, not someone else's desires. Seventh, keep separate records of your finances. Even if someone is helping you manage your money, you should have copies of all statements, all documents, all passwords. You should be able to access and review your own finances at any time. Eighth, be very cautious about the reverse mortgage or home equity loans. These can be appropriate financial tools in some situations, but they should never be pursued because a partner suggested it. Consult with your own financial advisor, not someone recommended by your partner. Ninth, if you're lending money to a partner, treat it like a business transaction. Get it in writing, set clear terms for repayment, and be prepared to never see that money again. If you can't afford to lose it, don't loan it. 10th, talk to your adult children or other trusted family members about your finances. They don't need to know every detail, but they should know generally what you have and what your plans are. This creates accountability and makes it harder for someone to financially exploit you without others noticing. If you're already being financially exploited, Here's what you need to do. First, stop the bleeding. Don't give any more money. Don't provide any more access. Don't sign any more documents. Whatever reason he gives, the answer is no. Second, document everything. Gather financial statements, receipts, documents, anything that shows where your money has gone. You'll need this if you pursue legal action or if you need to report fraud. Third, change all your passwords and PINs immediately. Lock down your accounts. If he has access, remove it. If he's an authorized user on credit cards, remove him. If he's on bank accounts, close them and open new ones he doesn't have access to. Fourth, check your credit report. Look for accounts or loans you don't recognize. Look for unauthorized activity. If you find fraudulent accounts, report them immediately. Fifth, consult with an attorney who specializes in elder law or financial abuse. Find out what your legal options are. Can you recover money? Can you press charges? What do you need to do to protect yourself? Sixth, consider filing a police report if actual fraud or theft has occurred. This creates a legal record and might be necessary for recovering assets or prosecuting crimes. Seventh, inform your bank and credit card companies that you may be a victim of financial exploitation. They can help you protect your accounts and monitor for suspicious activity. Eighth, tell your family what's happening. Yes, it's embarrassing. Yes, you feel foolish. But you need support and you need people watching out for you. Your family can help you navigate this. Ninth, if you've made him a beneficiary or added him to property deeds or made other legal, financial commitments, work with an attorney to undo these as quickly as possible. 10th, leave the relationship. Financial exploitation doesn't get better, it escalates. The longer you stay, the more you'll lose. And ultimately, your financial security is directly tied to your ability to support yourself as you age. You cannot afford to lose more. I know this is overwhelming. I know it's scary. I know you might be thinking that you're in too deep, that you've lost too much already, that it's too late. But it's not too late. Every day you stop the exploitation is a day you're protecting what's left. Every step you take to regain control is a step toward financial recovery. You deserve financial security. You deserve to enjoy the resources you've spent your life building. You deserve to know that your retirement, your home, your savings are safe. You deserve to make your own financial decisions without manipulation or coercion. And you deserve to age without the fear of poverty created by someone who claimed to love you. Financial exploitation is abuse. It's a crime. It's not a difference of opinion about money management. It's not a misunderstanding. It's deliberate theft and manipulation. And if it's happening to you, you need to treat it with the seriousness it deserves. Protect yourself. Get help. Get out. Isolation tactics and social control. One of the most dangerous things a toxic man does is separate you from your support system. Isolation is a core tactic of abuse because it accomplishes several goals at once. It makes you more dependent on the abuser. It removes witnesses who might recognize the abuse. It eliminates people who could help you leave. And it makes you easier to control because you have no one to validate your reality or challenge his version of events. For mature women, isolation tactics are particularly effective and particularly devastating. Let me explain why and how this happens. At this stage of life, your social connections may already be somewhat reduced compared to when you were younger. Friends have moved away, gotten busy with their own families, or passed away. Your children are likely adults with their own lives. You might be retired, removing daily workplace connections. Your parents may be elderly or deceased. This natural age-related reduction in social connections creates vulnerability that a toxic man will exploit. He doesn't have to isolate you as dramatically as he would a younger woman with an extensive social network. He just has to further erode the connections you already have and prevent you from forming new ones. Let me walk you through how isolation typically unfolds. In the beginning, during the love bombing phase, he's very interested in your life, your friends, your family. He wants to meet everyone. He's charming at social gatherings. He makes a good impression. He seems to fit into your life seamlessly. This lulls you into a false sense of security. You think he's social, that he values your relationships, that he'll be good about maintaining your connections. But slowly, things start to change. It might begin with subtle criticism of your friends or family. After you spend time with someone, he makes a casual comment. "Did you notice how much she drank? He seemed a little condescending toward you, didn't he? I don't think she's really happy for your happiness. He doesn't seem very supportive of you." These comments plant seeds of doubt. You start seeing your relationships differently. You start noticing things that maybe weren't there or weren't significant before. You start questioning whether your friends really have your best interests at heart. Then he starts suggesting that certain people are bad influences or bad for you. Your friend who's divorced is bitter about men and is projecting her negativity onto your relationship. Your sister is jealous of your happiness. Your co-worker is gossipy and untrustworthy. Your adult daughter is too involved in your business and needs to let you live your own life. He frames this as caring about you. He says he just wants to protect you from people who don't have your best interests at heart. He says he's noticed how drained you seem after spending time with certain people. He says he's concerned about how these relationships affect you. For many women, especially if there has been some tension in these relationships, his observations might seem insightful. Maybe your friend is a bit negative about relationships. Maybe your adult children are a bit controlling about your choices. Maybe that family member does say critical things sometimes. His observations seem to validate feelings you might have had, but not fully acknowledged. So you start pulling back from these relationships. Not dramatically at first. You're just a little less available. You don't share as much. You decline invitations more often. And each time you do, he praises you. "I'm glad you're setting boundaries. You deserve friends who really support you. You need to put your own happiness first." Another tactic is monopolizing your time. Remember, during love bombing, when he wanted to spend all his time with you? That continues, but now it's more about preventing you from spending time with others. When you have plans with friends or family, he creates conflicts. He's feeling sick and needs you. He has something special planned at the same time. He has an emergency. There's something important he needs to discuss. At first, you accommodate him. These seem like legitimate needs, but it happens repeatedly. Every time you have plans with someone else, there's a reason you should cancel. Eventually, it's easier to just not make plans with others because you know something will come up. Or he doesn't stop you from going, but he makes it so unpleasant that you don't want to. He pouts before you leave. He's cold and distant when you get back. He picks a fight right before you're supposed to go, so you leave upset. He texts you constantly while you're out, so you can't focus on the people you're with. He makes you feel guilty for leaving him or anxious about what mood he'll be in when you return. Let me talk about a tactic that's particularly effective with older women who have adult children. He creates distance between you and your kids. This is especially easy to do if there's already any tension in those relationships. Maybe your divorce affected your relationship with your children. Maybe they've made choices you disagreed with. Maybe there have been conflicts about inheritance or family issues. He'll exploit those existing cracks. He'll encourage you to set boundaries with your adult children in ways that are actually about cutting them out. He'll tell you that you've done your job raising them, and now it's your time. He'll say they're taking advantage of you. He'll point out every way they fall short as children. He'll make you feel like they don't appreciate you or respect you. When your children express concerns about him, he'll frame it as them being controlling or being worried about their inheritance or not. Wanting you to be happy, he'll say, they just can't accept that you've moved on. They want you to stay alone, so you're available to them. They're being selfish. He might also create scenarios designed to cause conflicts with your children. He's rude to them or their partners. He makes inappropriate comments. He creates situations where you have to choose between him and them. When you choose him to avoid conflict or because you think they're overreacting, the damage to your relationship with your children deepens. Some toxic men will actively campaign to turn you against your children. He'll bring up past hurts. He'll remind you of times they disappointed you. He'll interpret their actions in the worst possible light. He'll tell you stories about his own children or other people's children who betrayed or abandoned or took advantage of their parents, planting fear that your children will do the same. The result is that you become estranged from your adult children at exactly the time in life when that relationship is most important. You're approaching old age when you might need care and support, and you're damaging your relationship with the people who would naturally provide that. Another isolation tactic involves controlling technology and communication. He wants access to your phone, your email, your social media. He says it's about trust, about transparency, about having nothing to hide. But really, it's about monitoring and controlling your communication with others. He checks your messages. He reads your emails. He sees who you're talking to and what you're saying. This has a chilling effect on your communication. You can't vent to friends about problems in the relationship because he'll see it. You can't make plans without him knowing. You can't reach out for help without him finding out. You start self-censoring in all your communications. He might also insist on being present for your phone calls or visits with others. He says he just wants to be part of your life, that couples should share everything. But really, he's there to monitor what's said and to prevent you from speaking freely. Your friends and family start to feel uncomfortable. They feel like they can't talk to you alone. They pull back. Some men use health concerns as an isolation tactic. They convince you that you're not well enough to go out, to see people, to be active. They say they're worried about you. They say you need to rest more, that you're pushing yourself too hard, that stress is bad for your health. They encourage you to stay home, to limit activities, to avoid tiring yourself out. This can be particularly effective if you're dealing with any real health issues. Maybe you are tired more easily than you used to be. Maybe you do have some health concerns. He uses those legitimate issues to convince you to withdraw from life, ostensibly for your health, but really to isolate you. Geographic isolation is another tactic. He might encourage you to move away from your community, maybe to somewhere more affordable or quieter or closer to his family, or to a place you've always dreamed of living. The reasoning sounds good, but the result is that you're far from your support system, starting over in a place where you have no connections, where he's your only close relationship. This is especially devastating for older women because making new friends becomes harder with age. If you move to a new place, especially if it's rural or if you're not working, building a new social network is challenging. You end up dependent on him for all your social and emotional needs. Let me talk about financial isolation, which overlaps with the financial exploitation we discussed earlier. When he controls the money, he controls your ability to maintain relationships. You can't afford to go out with friends. You can't buy gifts for your grandchildren. You can't contribute to family celebrations. You can't travel to visit family. Your financial dependence becomes social isolation. There's also a tactic I call creating dependency through learned helplessness. He starts doing things for you, running errands, handling tasks, making decisions. At first, this seems helpful, but gradually you lose confidence in your ability to do these things yourself. He reinforces this by criticizing how you do things. You don't park well. You can't figure out technology. You get confused navigating. You're not good at dealing with certain people or situations. Over time, you start to believe you need him for basic functioning. You become afraid to do things alone. You feel incompetent without him. This creates a psychological dependence that keeps you trapped. Even if you want to leave, You don't believe you could manage life on your own. Now let me tell you why isolation is so dangerous. First, when you're isolated, there's no reality check on the abuse. He can gaslight you, and there's no one to say, "No, that's not what happened." He can tell you his behavior is normal, and there's no one to contradict him. He can claim you're the problem, and there's no one to validate that you're actually being treated badly. Second, isolation increases your emotional dependence on the abuser. When he's your only close relationship, you need him emotionally, even as he's hurting you. You have nowhere else to turn for companionship, conversation, comfort. This creates a trauma bond that's very difficult to break. Third, isolation makes it much harder to leave. You have no one to turn to for help. You might not have friends or family you can stay with. You might not have people who can lend you money or help you find resources. You're on your own, which is terrifying, especially if he's also destroyed your confidence and convinced you that you can't function independently. Fourth, isolation means there are no witnesses. If the abuse escalates to physical violence, there's no one who will notice injuries or changes in your behavior. If he's stealing from you or manipulating you in other ways, there's no one observing what's happening. The abuse can continue and escalate without any external intervention. Fifth, when you finally try to reach out for help after being isolated, people might not believe you or might be less willing to help. If you've pulled away from people, declined their invitations, not been available, they might feel hurt or rejected. When you suddenly reappear with problems, they might be less sympathetic. They might think, "You chose him over us, now you want us to fix it?" Here's how you recognize if you're being isolated. Look at your social connections now versus when you met him. Are you in touch with fewer people? Do you see friends and family less often? Have certain relationships ended or become strained? Do you spend most of your time alone with him? Ask yourself if you feel free to maintain relationships. Can you make plans without his input or approval? Can you see people without him present? Can you communicate privately with friends and family? If the answer to these questions is no, you're being isolated. Consider whether you've stopped doing activities you enjoyed. Did you quit a club or group? Did you stop attending church or community events? Did you give up hobbies that connected you with others? Often, isolation includes cutting you off from activities and communities, not just individuals. Think about whether you feel trapped or alone. Do you feel like he's your only real relationship? Do you feel like you have no one you could turn to if you needed help? Do you feel like you've lost yourself and don't know who you are anymore apart from this relationship? If you recognize that you're being isolated, here's what you need to do. Start rebuilding connections immediately. Reach out to people you've lost touch with. Be honest. Say you've been going through a difficult time and you'd like to reconnect. Most people will be more understanding than you think. Make plans to see people and keep those plans no matter what. If he creates a conflict or emergency, unless it's genuinely critical, medical emergency level, go anyway. Break the pattern of canceling for him. Join groups or activities. Find a book club, a volunteer organization, a fitness class. Anything that gets you out of the house regularly and connects you with people. Set boundaries around communication privacy. You have a right to private conversations. If he demands to see your phone or be present for calls, refuse. If he insists, recognize this as a major red flag. Reconnect with estranged family members if possible. If he's created distance between you and your children or siblings, reach out. Apologize if necessary. Explain that you've realized you let the relationship suffer and you want to rebuild it. If people express concerns about your relationship, listen. Don't defend him. Don't minimize. Really hear what they're saying. They care about you, and they're likely seeing things you can't see because you're too close to the situation. Tell people what's happening. Break the silence. You don't have to share every detail, but let people know you're struggling, that you need support. that the relationship isn't what it appeared to be. This is hard because of shame and embarrassment, but isolation thrives in secrecy. Consider getting a separate phone or email account that he doesn't know about. You need a way to communicate privately, to reach out for help, to plan an exit strategy if necessary. If you've moved away from your support system, consider moving back. If you've lost your community, consider whether rebuilding your life there is possible. Geographic distance from your support system makes everything harder. Most importantly, recognize that isolation is not happening by accident. It's not just that he prefers your company. It's not just that your friends don't understand him. It's not just that you're busy or tired. If you're isolated, it's because he's worked to isolate you. And that's abuse. You need people. Humans are social creatures. We need connection, community, relationships outside of our romantic partnerships. A healthy partner encourages those connections. They support your friendships and family relationships. They want you to have a full, rich life that includes but isn't limited to your relationship with them. If someone is cutting you off from the people and activities that give your life meaning, that's not love, that's control. And you need to break that control by rebuilding your connections, even if it feels impossible, even if he resists, even if it causes conflict. Your connections to others might literally save your life. Intermittent reinforcement and the trauma bond. We need to talk about why it's so hard to leave, even when you know the relationship is toxic. Why do smart, accomplished, mature women stay in relationships that are clearly damaging them? It's not weakness. It's not low self-esteem. It's not poor judgment. It's actually the result of a powerful psychological mechanism called intermittent reinforcement, and it creates something called a trauma bond. Understanding this is crucial because if you're struggling to leave a toxic relationship, this is probably why. And knowing what's happening can help you break free. Let me start by explaining intermittent reinforcement. It's a concept from behavioral psychology. It refers to a reward schedule where the reward comes unpredictably. Sometimes the behavior is rewarded, sometimes it isn't, and there's no consistent pattern. This unpredictability creates the strongest form of behavioral conditioning known to psychology. Here's how this works in a relationship. During the love bombing phase, you were consistently rewarded. He was consistently loving, attentive, romantic, wonderful. Your brain got flooded with feel-good chemicals every time you interacted with him. You felt happy, loved, secure, excited. This consistent positive reinforcement created a strong association between him and those good feelings. But then things changed. The love bombing ended and the devaluation began. Suddenly, he's not consistently wonderful anymore. He's critical, cold, distant, cruel. But, and this is crucial, he's not consistently terrible either. Sometimes he's still that amazing person from the beginning. Sometimes you get glimpses of the man you fell in love with. These unpredictable moments of kindness, affection, or good treatment after periods of poor treatment are intermittent reinforcement, and they're incredibly powerful. Your brain becomes wired to constantly seek that reward, that return to the good times. You become like a gambler at a slot machine, pulling the lever over and over because you know eventually there will be a payout. You just don't know when. Let me give you specific examples. After he's been cold and critical all week, he suddenly plans a romantic date night like he used to. The relief and joy you feel are overwhelming. You think, this is it, he's back, things are going to be good again. Your brain releases a flood of dopamine and other feel-good chemicals. This feels better than if he'd been consistently kind all week, because it's the contrast, the relief from the pain, that makes it so intense. Or after a terrible argument where he was verbally abusive, he apologizes and is tender and loving. He holds you. He tells you he's sorry, that he loves you, that he'll do better. You forgive him. You feel connected to him again. The makeup is almost euphoric because it comes after the pain of the conflict, or after he's been neglectful and distant, he suddenly love bombs you again for a few days. Constant attention, affection, sweet words. You're reminded of the beginning. You think you've turned a corner. But then after those few days, he withdraws again. These occasional rewards keep you hooked. You start organizing your behavior around trying to get those good moments. You think, if you can, just figure out what you did differently when he was nice. You can make him be that way more often. You walk on eggshells, trying to avoid whatever sets off the bad behavior. You're constantly trying to earn the good treatment. But here's the thing, there's no pattern. There's nothing you can do to reliably get the good treatment because it's not actually about your behavior. It's about his control. He's not responding to your actions. He's using intermittent reinforcement as a manipulation tactic, whether consciously or unconsciously. The unpredictability is the point. If he were consistently terrible, you'd leave. If he were consistently wonderful, he wouldn't have control. But this pattern of occasional kindness, mixed with frequent mistreatment, keeps you constantly off balance, constantly hoping, constantly trying, constantly hooked. This intermittent reinforcement creates what's called a trauma bond. A trauma bond is a strong emotional attachment that develops between an abuse victim and an abuser. It seems counterintuitive. Why would you feel bonded to someone who hurts you? But the cycle of abuse, followed by affection, creates this bond. The trauma bond is strengthened by several factors. First, the intensity of emotions involved. The highs are very high and the lows are very low. This emotional intensity creates strong memories and strong attachments. Relationships that are consistently moderate don't create the same intensity of bonding. Second, the trauma bond involves both reward and relief. You're not just bonded to the good moments, you're bonded to the relief of the pain stopping. When someone causes you pain and then stops causing pain, the relief feels like love. You're grateful when he stops being cruel. You're grateful when he's nice again. Your brain associates him with relief, even though he's the source of the pain in the first place. Third, the trauma bond is strengthened by isolation, which we discussed earlier. When he's your only close relationship, when you're cut off from other sources of support and affection, he becomes even more important. You need him more. The good moments are more valuable because they're your only source of positive connection. Fourth, the trauma bond involves hope. You remember who he was in the beginning. You've seen that person. You know that version of him exists, so you hold on to hope that he'll become that person again permanently. Every good moment feeds that hope. You think, he can be so wonderful when he wants to be. If I can just get through this rough patch, we can get back to how it was. Let me tell you why trauma bonds are particularly strong with mature women. When you're older, you've likely had other relationships. You know what real love feels like. You know what healthy attachment is. So when this intense bond forms, you interpret it as deep, meaningful love. You think, I've never felt this strongly about anyone. This must be something special. You also have more invested. You've reorganized your life around this person. You might have combined finances, moved, integrated families. Leaving means undoing all of that, which feels overwhelming. The sunk cost fallacy kicks in. You've invested so much, you don't want it to have been for nothing. There's also the factor of time becoming more precious. You might think, I don't have time to start over. I don't have time to be alone and then date again and build another relationship. I need to make this work. This sense of urgency keeps you trying harder to fix an unfixable situation. Let me talk about the cycle of abuse more specifically, because understanding it helps you recognize the pattern. The cycle typically has 4 phases. The tension-building phase is when things start to get uncomfortable. He's irritable, critical, distant. You feel like you're walking on eggshells. You can sense something bad is coming, but you don't know when or what it will be. Then comes the incident phase. This is when the actual abuse occurs. He explodes in anger. He says cruel things. He's emotionally abusive. There might be a big fight. This is the traumatic event. After that comes the reconciliation phase. He apologizes. He makes excuses. He blames stress or work or something external. He might cry, express remorse, promise to change. He's affectionate and loving. He might go back to love-bombing behaviors. This is when you feel hopeful again. This is when the trauma bond is reinforced. Finally, there's the calm phase. Things settle down. For a while, things are okay, maybe even good. You relax. You think the worst is over. You believe his promises to change. You're relieved. But then the tension starts building again, and the cycle repeats. Each time this cycle completes, the trauma bond gets stronger. You've been through another round of pain and relief. You've experienced another reconciliation that felt loving. You've had another period of calm that gave you hope, and then it starts again. Over time, the cycle often speeds up. The calm periods get shorter. The incidents might get worse. The reconciliation might become less elaborate because he knows you'll forgive him anyway. You're trapped in this cycle, and it's like being on a roller coaster you can't get off. Now, let me tell you about some specific ways intermittent reinforcement and trauma bonding manifest with older women. One is through health crises. Maybe you're dealing with health issues, or he is. During your vulnerable moments, he's supportive and caring. This creates powerful bonding. He's there when you're scared or in pain. You feel like he's your partner in dealing with difficult things. But between crises, he's back to poor treatment. Or it's through family events. When you're with his family, or yours, he's on his best behavior. He's charming, attentive, the perfect partner. You see the person you fell in love with. Other people comment on how wonderful he is. You think, see, this is who he really is. The problems must be my fault. But as soon as you're alone again, he's different. Or it's through financial generosity. Most of the time, he's financially exploitative. But occasionally, he does something generous. He buys you something nice. He pays for a trip. He gives you money. These occasional acts of generosity make you think he's not really using you financially, that he does care, that he does give back. Let me talk about why intermittent reinforcement is so much more powerful than consistent reinforcement. Studies with animals and humans show that behaviors conditioned through intermittent reinforcement are much harder to extinguish than behaviors conditioned through consistent reinforcement. If a rat is consistently rewarded for pressing a lever and then the rewards stop, the rat will stop pressing the lever relatively quickly. But if a rat is intermittently rewarded and then the rewards stop, the rat will keep pressing that lever for a very long time. The unpredictability of the reward made the behavior much more resistant to change. You're experiencing the same thing. If he were consistently terrible, you'd stop putting effort into the relationship. You'd give up. But because of the occasional rewards, the occasional good days, the occasional glimpses of the man you fell in love with, you keep trying. You can't help it. Your brain is wired to keep seeking that reward. This is why logical arguments often don't work with someone in a trauma-bonded relationship. Friends and family will say, "He's terrible to you 90% of the time. Why do you stay?" And you can't explain it in a way that makes sense to them, because you're not operating on logic. You're operating on a deeply ingrained behavioral pattern that's been created through intermittent reinforcement. Here's how you start to break a trauma bond. First, you have to recognize it exists. Understanding that what you're feeling isn't healthy love, but a trauma bond created through manipulation is the first step. It's not your weakness. It's a predictable psychological response to intermittent reinforcement. Second, you need to break the cycle. As long as you're in contact with him, As long as you're experiencing the cycle of abuse and reconciliation, the trauma bond will remain strong. You need distance, no contact if possible. The trauma bond weakens when you're not constantly being re-traumatized and then relieved. Third, you need to form other attachments. Reconnect with friends and family. Spend time with people who consistently treat you well. Your brain needs to experience what healthy, consistent, positive relationships feel like. This helps you recognize that the intermittent reinforcement isn't normal or acceptable. Fourth, you need to feel your feelings without acting on them. You're going to miss him. You're going to remember the good times. You're going to be tempted to reach out or to take him back. Feel those feelings. Acknowledge them, but don't act on them. The feelings will pass if you don't act on them. Fifth, you need to challenge the narrative. Write down the bad things. Keep a record. When you're tempted to remember only the good moments, read that record. Remind yourself of the full reality, not just the intermittent good times. Sixth, understand that the person you're bonded to isn't real. The man from the love bombing phase, the man who occasionally reappears, isn't who he really is. He's a performance. The real him is the pattern of behavior over time, which is predominantly negative. Seventh, get therapy if possible. A therapist who understands trauma bonding can help you process what you've experienced and develop strategies for breaking the bond. This is especially important because trauma bonds can make you vulnerable to entering similar relationships in the future if you don't work through them. Eighth, be patient with yourself. Trauma bonds don't break immediately. Even after you leave, even after no contact, you might still feel pulled back to him. This is normal. It takes time for the bond to weaken. Don't beat yourself up for still having feelings. Just don't act on them. Let me tell you what happens when you successfully break a trauma bond. At first, you'll probably feel worse. You'll miss him intensely. You'll question whether you made the right decision. You'll remember the good times obsessively. You might even go through physical symptoms like actual withdrawal, restlessness, anxiety, depression. This is your brain craving the dopamine hit it got from those intermittent rewards. But if you push through this period without going back, something shifts. The intensity starts to decrease. You start having hours, then days, where you're not thinking about him constantly. You start to see the relationship more clearly. You start to recognize the manipulation. You start to feel angry about how you were treated, which is actually a healthy sign of the trauma bond breaking. Eventually, you reach a point where the bond is broken. You can think about him without intense emotional reaction. You can recognize that what you felt was powerful, but it wasn't healthy love. You can see how you were manipulated, and you can move forward with your life. But here's the critical thing. You cannot break a trauma bond while you're still in the relationship. As long as you're still experiencing the cycle, as long as there's still intermittent reinforcement, the bond will remain strong or even strengthen. You have to leave. You have to cut contact. You have to break the cycle. I know that feels impossible. I know the thought of being without him feels unbearable. I know you believe you can't survive without him, but that's the trauma bond talking. That's the psychological conditioning. That's not reality. You can survive without him. You will survive without him. And more than survive, you'll eventually thrive. But you have to be willing to walk through the painful period of breaking the bond. You have to be willing to feel the withdrawal, the grief, the longing, without giving in to them. The trauma bond is one of the most powerful forces keeping you trapped in a toxic relationship. But it can be broken. It will be broken if you're willing to do the work. And on the other side of that broken bond is freedom, clarity, and the possibility of genuine, healthy love in the future if you choose it. You deserve better than intermittent kindness. You deserve better than occasional good treatment mixed with frequent abuse. You deserve consistent respect, care, and love. and you won't find that while you're trauma bonded to someone who's treating you badly. Breaking the trauma bond is hard. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But it's also necessary. Your life, your freedom, your peace, your future, they're all worth the pain of breaking free. We've covered a lot of difficult material today. I know this has been intense. Some of you are recognizing your own relationship in what I've described. Some of you are feeling overwhelmed, scared, angry, or confused. Those are all valid reactions. What I've shared with you today isn't easy to hear, and it's even harder to acknowledge when it's happening to you. But knowledge is power. Understanding these tactics, these patterns, these psychological mechanisms, that's the first step toward protecting yourself or freeing yourself if you're already trapped. You can't fight what you don't understand. You can't escape what you can't see. Now you can see. Let me summarize the key points we've covered. First, older women are specifically targeted by toxic men because of your maturity, your resources, your desire for companionship, and your particular vulnerabilities at this stage of life. This isn't your fault. Your qualities aren't weaknesses, but they can be exploited by someone with bad intentions. Second, love bombing creates an artificial euphoria that hooks you emotionally before you have time to evaluate whether this person is actually safe and healthy for you. The intensity isn't love, it's manipulation designed to bypass your judgment. Third, future faking keeps you invested in a relationship that isn't working by dangling promises of a wonderful future that never materializes. You're living your life on hold, waiting for something that isn't coming. Fourth, gaslighting destroys your confidence in your own reality, memory, and perceptions. It makes you dependent on the abuser to tell you what's true. It's psychological abuse designed to control you through confusion and self-doubt. Fifth, financial exploitation can destroy your security and independence. It can leave you impoverished, trapped, and unable to leave even when you recognize the abuse. Sixth, isolation cuts you off from the support systems that could help you recognize the abuse and escape it. It makes you dependent on the abuser for all your emotional and social needs. Seventh, intermittent reinforcement and trauma bonding create a powerful psychological attachment that makes leaving feel impossible, even when you know you should. It's not weakness. It's a predictable response to a manipulative pattern. All of these tactics work together. They reinforce each other. The love bombing creates attachment. The future faking creates investment. The gaslighting creates self-doubt. The financial exploitation creates dependence. The isolation removes support. And the intermittent reinforcement creates addiction to the relationship. It's a comprehensive system of control. Now, I want to talk directly to you if you recognize your relationship in what I've described. First, I want you to know that you're not alone. This happens to countless women, smart women, accomplished women, strong women, women who never thought they could be manipulated. You're not stupid. You're not weak. You're human, and you were targeted by someone who is skilled at manipulation. Second, it's not your fault. You didn't cause this. You couldn't have prevented it by being smarter or more careful or less trusting. These men are skilled at what they do. They've practiced. They know exactly what to say and do to hook you. This is on them, not on you. Third, you can leave. I know it doesn't feel that way. I know you feel trapped by finances, by isolation, by fear, by the trauma bond, by 1,000 reasons. But women leave these relationships every day. Women in worse situations than yours have left. It's possible. It's hard, but it's possible. Fourth, you need to make a plan. Leaving an abusive relationship requires planning, especially if there are financial entanglements or if you fear escalation. Don't announce you're leaving and then try to figure it out. Figure it out first, then leave. Here's what a plan might look like. Start by securing your important documents. Make copies of everything. financial records, property deeds, insurance policies, identification, everything. Store these copies somewhere safe that he can't access. A. Bank safety deposit box in your name only. A trusted friend's house. Somewhere secure. Document the abuse. Keep a journal. Save messages. Take screenshots. Record incidents with dates and details. You might need this evidence later for legal proceedings, for getting a protective order, or just to remind yourself of the reality when you're tempted to go back. Build a support network. Reconnect with people. Tell them what's happening. Ask for help. Most people will want to help if they understand the situation. Don't try to do this alone. Secure your finances. Open accounts he doesn't know about. Change direct deposits to go to new accounts. Remove him from any accounts where he has access. Protect your credit. If you can, start setting aside money for when you leave. Even small amounts add up. Find resources. Look for domestic violence organizations in your area. Even if you don't think your situation qualifies as domestic violence, they can help. They have resources, counseling, legal assistance, sometimes even temporary housing. Look for legal aid if you need an attorney but can't afford one. Look for support groups for women leaving abusive relationships. Make a safety plan. If you think there's any chance of violence or escalation when you leave, plan carefully. Have a place to go. Have someone who knows your plan. Have your important items already removed. Leave when he's not there. Consider getting a protective order if you fear for your safety. Change your routines. Once you leave, he shouldn't be able to predict where you'll be. Change your routes. Change your patterns. Be unpredictable. Cut contact. This is crucial. As long as you're in contact, the manipulation will continue. The trauma bond will remain strong. Block him on everything. Email, phone, social media, everything. If you have to communicate because of legal or financial entanglements, do it only in writing and only through attorneys if possible. Get therapy. You need professional help to process what you've been through and to heal from it. A therapist who specializes in trauma and abusive relationships can help you work through the trauma bond, rebuild your self-esteem, and avoid similar relationships in the future. Give yourself time. Healing doesn't happen overnight. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have moments of weakness. You're going to remember the good times and miss him. This is all normal. Don't judge yourself for it. Just keep moving forward. Now, I want to talk to those of you who aren't in this situation, but know someone who is. Maybe you're watching this because you're concerned about your mother, your sister, your friend. First, understand that you can't force someone to leave. They have to be ready. All you can do is plant seeds, offer support, and be there when they're ready to leave. Don't criticize her or tell her she's stupid for staying. That will push her away and make her defend him. Instead, express your concerns gently and specifically. Instead of, "He's terrible," say, "I'm concerned when I see him speak to you that way," or, "I'm worried about how isolated you've become." Maintain the relationship even if she's pulled away. Keep reaching out. Keep inviting her to things even if she usually declines. Let her know you're there and you care. Don't give up on her. If she talks about problems in the relationship, listen without judgment. Don't say, "I told you so." Don't criticize her for staying. Just listen and validate her feelings. Ask open-ended questions that help her think through the situation herself. Offer concrete help. Not just, "Let me know if you need anything," but specific offers. Can I help you look for an apartment? Do you need a place to stay? Can I help you talk to a lawyer? Do you want me to go with you to file a police report? Educate yourself about domestic violence and abusive relationships so you can better understand what she's going through and what help might look like. Now, let me address something important. This video has focused on toxic men because that's the topic we're discussing today. But I want to be clear that abuse can happen in any relationship configuration. Women can be abusive too. Abuse occurs in same-sex relationships. Younger people can abuse older people. The dynamics I've described can appear in any relationship. The reason I'm focusing on older women and toxic men is because this is a specific pattern that isn't discussed enough. Older women are often invisible in conversations about abuse. People assume that by the time you reach your 40s, 50s, 60s, you're too smart or experienced to fall for manipulation, but that's not true. And that assumption means fewer resources, less awareness, and more shame for women in this situation. You deserve to be protected. You deserve to be informed. You deserve to be taken seriously. Your abuse is real, even if you're not a young woman. Your pain is valid, even if you're financially stable. Your experience matters, even if you're educated and accomplished. Age doesn't make you immune to manipulation. It just changes how the manipulation looks. I also want to say something to the women who've already left. You're not done healing. You might have physical distance, but the psychological effects of what you experienced take time to heal. You might still struggle with self-doubt, with questioning your perceptions, with trauma responses. This is normal. Be patient with yourself. Keep working on healing. Keep going to therapy. Keep building your support system. Keep taking care of yourself. And be careful about jumping into a new relationship too quickly. One of the risks after leaving a toxic relationship is vulnerability to entering another one. You might feel lonely. You might want to prove to yourself that you can have a healthy relationship. You might want to fill the void. But you need time to heal first. You need time to relearn to trust yourself. You need time to understand what happened so you can recognize red flags better in the future. When you do eventually consider dating again, go slowly. Pay attention to red flags. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore warning signs because you're eager for companionship. Don't let anyone rush you or pressure you. Take your time getting to know someone. Keep your finances separate. Maintain your independence. Protect yourself. And know that it's also completely okay if you decide you don't want to date again. Some women, after experiencing a toxic relationship, decide they're happier alone. That's a valid choice. You don't need a partner to have a fulfilling life. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your life, your choice. Let me also address the women watching this who aren't in a toxic relationship but are worried about ending up in one. The best protection is education and awareness. Know the red flags. Trust your instincts. Go slowly in new relationships. Keep your independence. Maintain your support system. Don't ignore warning signs because someone seems perfect otherwise. Remember that healthy relationships develop gradually. They don't involve overwhelming intensity right away. Healthy partners respect your boundaries. They encourage your independence. They support your other relationships. They're consistent in their treatment of you. They take responsibility for their actions. They communicate directly and honestly. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't talk yourself out of your instincts. Don't rationalize red flags. Don't make excuses for behavior that makes you uncomfortable. Listen to that inner voice that's trying to protect you. Now, I want to talk about hope, because everything I've shared today is heavy and difficult and might feel overwhelming or depressing. But there is hope. Women escape these relationships and go on to build beautiful lives. They heal, they rebuild, they rediscover themselves, they find peace and happiness. It's possible. It happens every life day. You are not defined by what happened to you. You're not broken beyond repair. You're not too old to start over. You're not damaged goods. You're a survivor. You're strong. You're capable. And you have a future that can be so much better than your present. You can rebuild your finances. You can rebuild your social connections. You can rebuild your confidence. You can rebuild your life. It takes time. It takes work. It takes support. But it can be done. and it's worth doing. Your best years are not behind you. You have so much life left to live. You have experiences to enjoy, people to connect with, goals to achieve, growth to experience. Don't let someone steal your remaining years. Don't let someone take your peace, your joy, your potential. You deserve happiness. You deserve respect. You deserve kindness. You deserve genuine love if you want it. You deserve financial security. You deserve psychological safety. You deserve to live without fear, without confusion, without constantly walking on eggshells. You deserve a life that feels good, not just occasionally but consistently. And you can have that life, but you might have to fight for it. You might have to make difficult choices. You might have to leave behind what's familiar even though it's painful. You might have to disappoint people. You might have to face your fears. But on the other side of those difficult choices is freedom, and freedom is worth fighting for. Before we end, I want to remind you to take action. If you found this video helpful, if it gave you information you needed, if it validated your experiences, hit that like button. Your engagement helps this video reach more women who need this information. It tells the algorithm that this content matters. Every like makes a difference. Leave a comment. Share your story if you feel comfortable. Ask questions. Tell me what resonated with you. Your comments create a community where women can support each other, share experiences, and learn from each other. Your voice matters. Use it. Share this video. Send it to every woman you know who might benefit from this information. Post it on your social media. Email it to friends and family. The more women who understand these tactics, the harder it becomes for toxic men to use them successfully. Knowledge is protection. Spread that protection. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We're building a community of informed, empowered women who refuse to be manipulated or controlled. We create content that helps you understand relationship dynamics, recognize red flags, protect yourself, and build the life you deserve. Be part of this community. Click that subscribe button. And if you want to support the work we're doing here, consider supporting the channel with super thanks. Creating this kind of in-depth, research-based content takes significant time and resources. Your financial support helps us continue producing videos that help women protect themselves and thrive. Any amount helps and is deeply appreciated. Remember, you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, there are resources available. There are people who want to help. There are organizations dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships. Reach out. Ask for help. You don't have to do this alone. You are valuable. You are worthy. You are enough. And you deserve so much better than what you're accepting right now. Don't settle for intermittent kindness mixed with abuse. Don't settle for a future that never materializes. Don't settle for someone who makes you doubt your own mind. Don't settle for someone who steals your resources and isolates you from everyone who loves you. You deserve consistent love, respect, honesty, and partnership. If you're not getting that, it's time to make a change. I know it's scary. I know it's hard. But you can do hard things. You've done hard things before. You can do this too. Your life is precious. Your time is finite. Your peace matters. Your happiness matters. You matter. Don't waste your remaining years on someone who doesn't treasure you. Don't give your best years to someone who's draining you. Don't sacrifice your well-being for someone who's destroying it. Choose yourself. Choose your freedom. Choose your future. Make the decision that your future self will thank you for. Be brave. Be strong. Be willing to face temporary pain for lasting peace. You can do this. I believe in you, and I'm rooting for you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being open to this difficult information. Thank you for caring enough about yourself or someone you love to seek out knowledge that can protect and empower. That takes courage. You have courage. Use it. Stay strong, stay safe, and remember, you deserve a life that feels good to live. Not just occasionally, but every day. Go create that life. The world needs you whole, healed, and thriving. And you can get there, starting right now. Like this video if it helped you. Comment below with your thoughts or questions. Share this with women who need to see it. Subscribe to join our community and support us with super thanks if you're able. Together, we're creating a world where fewer women fall victim to these tactics and more women live in freedom, safety, and joy. Thank you for being part of this mission. Until next time, take care of yourself. You're worth it.